Hello and welcome to the 75th episode of Josh's Car Corner. This is kind of going to be the scorch-in-teen version of the show. It's not quarantine, I'm okay, I don't have COVID or anything, but it is 120 degrees outside. I am not doing any filming in the garage. I'm not going to do that to myself. So what we're going to be doing in this episode is I'm going to be taking you through a little tour of the last couple months of trying to get this project going with the GTO and some of the trials and tribulations I have gone through trying to make this whole thing work. See, I was trying to keep what I was going to do with the engine secret. I didn't want to give it away. I wanted to surprise everybody, but what I wanted to do is not going to happen now, so I figured I might as well just tell everybody what I was trying to do so you can better understand why I'm no longer going to do it. I was going to do a tribute to the Holden Monaro, because you know Holden's now dead in Australia, or it will be in a few months, officially gone. And they did a couple hundred examples of a very rare version of the Monaro down there called the 427. Basically made a 7-liter Holden engine. It wasn't an LS7. They just made a 7-liter engine and stuck it in the car. I might be wrong about that. They might have only made 5 examples of the 427, but it was probably the most ultimate version of the Monaro, more ultimate even than HSV ever came up with on their own. Amazing car, and if you avidly follow Holden in the Australia, you would know that as a gimmick to try to get people to go into Holden dealerships to buy spare parts for their cars, they did this thing called Project Monaro about a year and a half ago, where they took an old Monaro, I think it was a VY, and they just basically bought it and took it apart and just cleaned it up, made a couple of little tweaks here and there, a couple of cosmetic upgrades and a couple of mild performance upgrades, basically a camshaft, and rebuilt the transmission and just went through the entire engine and rebuilt it. Didn't add a ton of power. It was a one-off that if you went into a Holden dealership and you bought parts, you were automatically entered for a chance to win this thing when the project was done. And I thought, I don't think they went far enough. So I was going to try to one-up Holden and make an even better version of their concept Project Monaro. So I was going to do my own 427 engine. I was going to take my original block and my engine builder was going to re-sleeve it with Darton sleeves. And then we were going to bore it out to 4125, and then we were going to put a 4-inch stroker kit in it. The thing that's good about the Darton sleeves is they are slightly longer than the factory sleeves, so when you use a 4-inch stroker kit, the pistons have more support going up and down because that sleeve is longer, so they can support the piston all the way down at the bottom of the throw. So it's a much better program if you want to run a 4-inch stroker kit. Now, what was going to happen is the guy who has all the GTO parts, he and I are pretty good friends now. And he has a couple of LS7s that he was going to part out. And I was going to buy the rotating assembly out of one of them from him. So I was going to end up with an LS7 crank, titanium rods, and I wasn't going to reuse the factory pistons because they're aluminum and they are known to crack. I was going to get some nice forged pistons made, which coincidentally, good forged steel pistons weigh actually a little bit less than the factory LS7 aluminum pistons. And then what happened is my engine builder started developing some health problems. Ultimately had to go to the hospital and ended up having to have his prostate removed, and spent a good number of weeks out, and when he was in the shop he wasn't working full time, and he's unfortunately the only one in the shop that does this sleeve replacement because it is a very technical thing. There's a lot of math involved, and to do it right you have to really have the experience and know what you're doing. Well, he was in and out, and I didn't want to wait for him to get back to health. I wanted to get the project moving, so I thought instead, for what it costs to do the sleeve replacement, it costs just a little bit more to start over with a fresh block from Texas Speed. So then I reached out to Texas Speed and said, hey, take one of your Gen 4 basic blocks and sleeve it for me, and then I'll use that to build the engine up. Now, Texas Speed said it was going to take 4 to 6 weeks to complete the engine. I'm assuming they were going to have to wait for the sleeves, just as my builder said he was going to have to wait for the sleeves, and they were backlogged. Darton wasn't making them because COVID had everything shut down. So whatever, I placed the order, and I was prepared to wait that long. Gave me time to think about what else I was going to do. So, well, we get the rotating assembly apart that I think I'm going to use. And 4 or 5 of the rods are galled on the big end. And if you know anything about the LS7 titanium rods is, titanium, when it comes in contact with other titanium, it's a very strong metal, but it's also a very gummy metal. And when it gets hot and rubs against itself, it wears itself out and gets gummy and throws metal all over the engine. So they put this special coating on the rods to keep that from happening. But with improper service intervals or improper use of the engine, running power adders, or just not doing your service as often as you should, you not using the right oil, the coating wears off. And 4 or 5 of these cylinder or rods had already had the coating wore off, and the rods were galling, which means they are worthless. You can't machine them down. You can't recoat them to make them okay again. Once they're galled, they're done. So they're worthless. So I'm like, okay, well, we have a crank, but I don't have rods. But the LS7 cranks are balanced to those titanium rods. You can't just throw a set of steel rods on an LS7 crank. It'll never balance out. So I said, okay, I'll see if somebody is selling some LS7 rods. And there was a place on eBay out of California. I think it's called AAA Auto Parts. They had an auction, and they were selling a complete set of LS7 rods that were a takeout from an engine that they stripped out. Had them on there forever. I think he was off asking $1,000. I offered him $900. He called me within 10 minutes and said, done. So I bought these rods, and I got them to me. And first off, I should have been a little concerned that when I opened the box, all of the rods, they were in 2 stacks of 4, and there was this foam paper wrap going around the outside edge, but they were just laying on top of each other. There was no foam paper in between them to separate them so they wouldn't rub in transit. And I'm just inspecting the rods, and one of them is just bent, like severely bent. There's no way if you looked at it you would not have noticed it bent. So I call him up and I say, hey, one of these rods is bent. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'll replace it, no charge. And he did. So then I'm looking at them in more detail, and I have a conversation with the guy who has all the GTO parts. I took pictures of all the big ends, and he said, 2 of those look galled. I'm like, okay. Well, I didn't really know what galling looked like because I'd never seen it before. But so I called the guy back, and he said, well, I was just talking to a friend of mine who's been working with LS7 rods right now, and he said 2 of these rods look galled. And he just kind of threw a big fit. He's like, wait, so he's not an engine builder, and he's telling you they're galled without you having them examined? And I was like, okay, kind of fair enough. I'll have the engine builder look at them. So the engine builder looks at him, comes back and says, not only are those 2 rods galled, but one of them doesn't even have a matching cap and rod. When these LS7 rods are assembled, they're stamped with a 3-digit number on them, so you know which caps and which rods match up. And they were absolutely right. One of the rods, the numbers were different. They didn't match up. And when you look at the bore inside, it didn't even line up. It was actually off by a few thousandths, and there was a noticeable ridge that you could feel with your finger. So it wasn't going to work. So I said, okay, I'm done screwing with this. So I sent him back, and he sent me the money back. But again, I'm nowhere with a rotating assembly. So I'm thinking, okay, now I'm going to have to buy a 4-inch stroke kit with steel. I really wanted the weight savings of the titanium, and I thought it'd be cool to use that, but it wasn't going to happen. So I said, okay, fine, we'll just buy a new crank and buy some new rods, which was actually going to cost me more than what my buddy was going to sell me his LS7 rotating assembly for. So now we go back to Texas Speed. 6 weeks have passed, and I have heard nothing about my engine block. So I call them up and say, hey, it's been 6 weeks. You said it would take 4 to 6. I'm just wondering where my engine is in the production line. And they get back to me the same day and said, well, we checked. Yours is number 4 in the queue to be produced. And I'm thinking, okay, well, it ought to be done in a couple of days then and shipped out to me. Well, another 2 weeks go by, and I still haven't heard anything. And at this point, I'm just getting pissed. Because it's like, how can you not communicate? I've spent, and just so you know, you want to get one of these blocks from Texas Speed, it's $3,100 for the block, plus just throwing the sleeves in. No machine work at all to get the motor ready to assemble. Just putting the sleeves into a block. So this is not a small amount of money. And I call them up, and it's like, okay, I haven't heard anything from you. What's going on? I was dealing with a salesman, name is Chase. And I basically say to him, look, I'm tired of waiting. You're not communicating with me. If you can't get me the engine shipped out by this upcoming Friday, I just want my money back. And he responds same day as before and said, yeah, I'm going to look into this and let you know what's going on. Didn't hear from him the entire week. So yesterday, because I'm filming this the day after, I did call Texas Speed, had to wait on the phone half an hour, was talking to another salesman whose name I cannot remember, and told him, look, I've been waiting long enough, I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't sound like my engine's ready, so I just want to cancel the order. So he looks into it and says, oh no, your engine's done. What do you mean it's done? Oh yeah, it's been done. Yeah, we're having trouble getting transport trucks to ship right now. So yeah, it's been sitting here waiting for that. So as soon as we can get a truck for it, it'll ship. I'm like, well, why couldn't somebody have told me that? I sent an email saying, look, if it isn't ready to ship by Friday, I'm canceling. Wouldn't that inspire somebody to look into it a little bit and tell me what's going on? Apparently it didn't inspire this Chase to do anything. And I wouldn't even bring up the gripes about Texas Speed, but I was just talking to my friend Ali this morning. He likes to scour the Facebook groups and look for parts and see what's going on. And he said there's been a lot of people who have been upset with Texas Speed lately on how long it's taking to get things from them. Not just manufactured parts, but parts they should have on the shelf. It's just taking a long time. And they're not being responsive to customers. They're not telling them what's going on. And that's what people are saying, according to him. So, I mean, I'm not saying don't buy from Texas Speed, but my personal experience was not good. I was not communicated with. I spent a hell of a lot of money, and I ultimately just said cancel it. I don't want it anymore. And I decided I'm going to change my plan again. So here's where we're at. Now I'm back to square one. I've got a good block that just needs to be taken apart and cleaned and put back together. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to just put the engine back together. I'm going to put a hotter cam in it, little hotter than I put in there. I realized when I spec'd out that one 7 years ago, I made a mistake that I need to correct. So I'm going to make it a little hotter, and I might just put it back together with the factory heads. I've thought a lot about getting a set of AFR heads, just because their flow numbers are amazing and they're a really well-built product. Everything I've ever seen online that uses AFR heads, just really good results. And I am going to get another MSD intake. So it's going to get put back together. It's not going to be this fire-breathing monster that this 427 build would have been, because that probably would have made 650, 700 horsepower without any power adders. This build will probably make somewhere around, I don't know, 550 or so. And you know what? That's enough. I don't need more than that. I'm not trying to set the world on fire with drag racing records or anything. I still want to be able to drive it on the street and enjoy it. So that's where I'm at right now, and that's what's going to happen with the engine. Now, getting back to the projects I was working on in the last video, I do have some updates on that. So remember, I was saying I wanted to run the GTO on an E38 computer so I could use a Gen 4 motor, and I was trying to figure out whether that was even possible. Well, the answer is yes, but to do it, you basically have to change everything. Now, I've talked with people in Australia about this. You have to change the body control module. It's a different version. It runs different software, which means you then have to change the powertrain information module. And obviously you're changing the computer, but you also have to change the engine harness, because there's one of the connectors for the ECU that goes back to the BCM. That's different. It's got different connectors. It interprets signals from the new ECU differently, so you have to have a different one. Then you have to change the keys. It was getting to the point where it was going to be so complicated. Yes, I could do it, but there's no way I could ever expect anyone else to do it, even if I showed you how I did everything. It's just too complicated. You'd have to order tons of parts from Australia. I'd have to have a company in the state of Victoria down there program all the modules for me and then send them back to me. It was just going to be too much. So I'm going to stick with the E40. It isn't worth it to do it on this car based on how I'm going to use it. So just going to stick with that and stick with a 24X crank reluctor. I'm not going to get to do any of the other things I wanted to do with an E38. Maybe some other project. Now, you might be wondering why I gave up on the Godzilla motor. I'm going to say that something's come up in the last couple of weeks, something that I was not expecting to happen, but when it did, it has completely changed not only what I'm going to be doing with the GTO, but what is going to be going on for the future of Josh's Car Corner. And it's going to be good. It's going to be really, really good. And I don't want to give anything away. I know some people would rather me just come out with it, but I like the surprise factor. I thought the Godzilla motor would be a cool surprise factor thing to do. But it's something no one is going to expect, and I think very few people have ever even seen before. There are some people out there in the car community that might already know what this is. I ask you to please hold your tongue until I can reveal it to everyone on my terms, because I think it's that cool. But there is something very, very cool coming. I keep saying that, I know, but it's going to be good. It's going to be really, really good. So that's where I'm at with this edition. Hope you enjoy my little office I'm starting to set up here with my computer back here and my editing studio. Eventually I'm going to turn this into a really nice office. Then I might just start doing some in-office episodes, and when I would just want to do a Q&A or just do some tech tips online. I've thought about doing that too. I want to do some more technical aspects of building a GTO and engine building and the math that goes into it and the science. I've done so much research trying to build this Godzilla motor. I learned a lot more about building engines that I didn't know before, and it's good information that I think everybody who wants to build an engine should know to help them determine how they want to build their own engine. Look for the next episode. I'm hoping it will come out in the next week or two. I don't really have any control over when it's going to unveil right now, but as soon as I can unveil it, I'm going to unveil it. So look for that. Thank you for watching Josh's Car Corner to this point through all 75 episodes I've done so far. There's going to be a lot more. I promise you more content this year, and I promise you again, it's going to get really good and a lot of content really soon. So look forward to that, and I will see everybody next time.